had put aside all of the honour and respect the family had earned over the generations and took himself to the high seas. The possibility of his being a foundling had been brought up a time or two, but my mother always said the Admiral clearly had the nose of my grandfather, so the family had simply done their best to distance themselves from him. My father, for his part, had tried to keep the Admiral's exploits in the Opium War from reaching the ears of his family, but with my uncle's name mentioned in the broadsheets almost daily during the war, and with his being knighted by the Queen herself, it was an impossibility. Now, having established ourselves in Overwich, Father and the Admiral seemed to have arrived at a sort of uneasy agreement to be friends, and for better or for worse, my uncle made it his business to call upon us weekly. I left him waiting in the central white-plastered front hall, hands clasped behind his back, feet firmly planted on the floor, as I went to fetch my father. Once in the hall, my father spied the mail and took it up. Opening the letter I'd earlier received from the British Association for the Advancement of Science, he began to read it. I plucked it from his hands in order to save him the trouble. I submitted a paper on the flora of the subantarctic islands.
And what did they think?
They refused it when I submitted it under my own name last year, but they did tell me that if you cared to address the subject, they might reconsider. He blinked behind his round wire spectacles.
But I would never address that subject.
Which had made the rejection all the worse.
Why would I write about the distribution of plants when my interest lies in the classification of them?
My point exactly, but I took the liberty of resubmitting it under your name this year, and they could not praise it enough. They've decided to publish it. As I spoke, I approached the Admiral for the purpose of taking his coat. He turned around and lifted his arm so I could pull it from his shoulders. I gave it a good shake and hung it from a hook on the hall stand. I don't know why I expected the decision to be made on the merit of the work alone. Why it was that I kept hoping one day I might be published under my own name. The Admiral removed his grey top hat and tucked it into the crook of his arm as he stood watching me. What point is there in any of this if my sex makes my work unacceptable? Why do I even try? Father and the Admiral exchanged a look as I turned and walked from the hall into the parlour, intending to return to my illustration. The Admiral entered behind me, every wave of his side-parted steel-coloured hair gleaming, every item of his clothing crisply pressed and his boots shining, in great contrast to my father, who was quite the opposite. If anything gleamed on him, it was his spectacles. His hair was an indiscriminate greying brown, his jacket wrinkled, his trousers bagging at the knees, and his boots were off his feet entirely. He was standing before us in stockinged feet. The Admiral was surveying the green velvet sofa and the table, which were piled, as always, with books and specimens and papers. I'm certain he had not failed to note the dust that covered everything with a grey sort of down, though he seemed to pass no judgment upon us. He merely crossed the thread-worn carpet to the fireplace, grabbed hold of his hat, and waved it in our direction.
It's interesting you should comment on the limitations of your sex, Charlotte. I've been trying to convince your father that it's not right for him to keep you shut up here, nor that you should be so devoted to your collections.
I wouldn't say that he's shut me.
Botany is a pastime that many girls of your generation share.
He began to pace in front of the soot-stained hearth, from which I really ought to have cleaned the ashes last winter. Seeing, however, that autumn was upon us once more, I reasoned that they might as well stay where they were.
We've been told that it's a virtue to investigate God's creation, though we might be better off, of course, if we begged heaven to save us from the virtues of the virtuous. But even you must have observed that even those who are impassioned of plants and flowers do not fail to find a husband or to partake in God's blessings of children and family. If you want to give yourself to a work better suited to your sex, if you wish to partake in all that life has to offer you, perhaps it is that upon which you should focus.
The Admiral still seemed to suffer from the idea that he could do for me those things that he had failed to do for my mother. He had made the same entreaty every year since we had moved to Overwich, and I found the idea no more attractive now than I had in the past.